Dalgunu is it Dalgunu or Dangunu?
Filippo Dalgunu, yeah, quality.
He is brilliant.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this sort of hot fact on him. He was the Fiji under-20 football goalkeeper.
Wow.
Sort of moving to rugby.
What a fact that is.
Yeah. Bizarre.
Hello, and in the week that Exeter will face Wasps in the Premiership final, it's New Zealand and Australia in the classic Bledisloe. South Africa unlocked, began, but nothing really happened over there. Mitre 10 cracked on, and more COVID games have called off as our beloved Bordeaux against Clermont was postponed due to COVID. We're back as a foursome. How are we doing, boys? You all right?
Good, thanks.
Good. Finally turned up.
There we go. We're all back. Monday night, recording this. Well, as I said, we'll go through all the stuff with the Premiership, have a chat about Australia and New Zealand, touch upon the South African competition, and a bit of COVID-related stuff in sport. And if anyone wants to talk about some international stuff, as more teams have announced some international recalls, we'll crack on in a moment. But let's go Premiership first. Let's start with the game of the weekend, which was Wasps dismantling of Bristol. Harry, as a Wasps fan, how excited are you that they are now back in the Prem final and they've now got a seriously good shot of beating Exeter?
It's hilarious, actually. If you think about how worried we were about this Wasps team, that they were in danger of falling into that slightly unfortunate spending lots of money on New Zealanders, not getting anything out of it, some good young talented players, but what's actually going to happen? Star players start leaving, various rumours, some substantiated, some unsubstantiated, about the off-field issues. I know the training ground is yet to be fully resolved.
Yeah.
But Lee Blackett has done an unbelievable job with this team, and you can't say that, you can't repeat it often enough. The bravery, frankly, to start with, a 6-2 bench in a cup semi-final game is not without precedent this year, or certainly within the last 12 months. But for 3 of those 6 forwards to be 19 or younger is incredible. And they were all fantastic. It's just really exciting.
They've out of the Die Young leave, and as I say, Lee Blackett's gone with a bit more youth. He's allowed the youth to come through, and it's just glued for them. I think someone that we've not really spoken about on this pod with relation to Wasps, and they talked about it in big match between him against Radradra, but Mekalai Fekatoa, who was nowhere for 5 games when he first came over, and we're like, what the hell is this kid all about? But last week against Exeter, we didn't really discuss it on the pod, but that hit that he put the winger into next week with, and then again, solidly defence, and then turns defence into attack. He's kind of like an unsung hero in that Wasps team, where if you look at Bristol on the flip side, everyone's like, oh my God, Radradра's got the ball, we've got to go wide, panic. But Fekatoa is almost as good as him. And has that impact, especially on a defensively organisation-wide. What he's just so key, and it's going to be so important in the final, because we're him against Henry Slade. If Henry Slade plays, that is a deadly combo. But Wasps looking good. Anyone, Joe and Johnny, any points on Wasps?
Yeah, I think it's just some of their players have just suddenly turned up. I mean, Kieran Brooks in the past, kind of, I don't know, since the kind of lockdown has come back, like he kind of went off the boil at Northampton, and he's suddenly back. And I know he put that huge hit in, but like past few weeks he's been great. And like, it'd be nice to give Jimmy Gopperth a good send off, because I think kind of he was fantastic, and I think he nearly made the most amount of tackles for Wasps on Saturday, or he seemed to put a lot of tackles in, and he just seems to be, for a man who's, I don't know, 38, seems pretty good around the park and puts his body on the line still.
Yeah, I think it's really not an accident that Wasps upturn in form, and really all of their good periods since Gopeth arrived have coincided with him being fit. He's very, very good, both in communicating with the rest of the back line, leads by example, has more club experience than almost any other player that we've seen. And I think it's something the Wasps has done a really good job of making use of. Obviously, those couple of years of George Smith, Curtly Beale was actually quite a good mentor at that point, and then Gopeth as well, using the older experienced players they have to help the young, really talented players. It's been fantastic.
He would definitely be in the one of the best imports to the Premiership of all time.
Yeah,
definitely in the top three. Like the impact that he's had, like when he was at they wouldn't have forgotten if you were a Newcastle fan, but he kept Newcastle in the Premiership time after time when they were struggling, and then obviously moved to Leinster and had won championships, came back, and I mean he's still doing the business at his age. Is massive credit to him. Quick note on Bristol: do they need to have a bit of a different game plan when they get to the latter stages of competitions? Do they need to have a different way of playing, that they just they want to play like Southern Hemisphere team, chuck the ball around? Do they need a plan B when they get a team that wants to attack them, and where they need to think about being defensive and they need to think about playing the right areas? Don't really think about that, because they were quite comfortably beaten in the end.
The phrase "defense wins championships" is not made up. It's not a cliche without some foundation, and you possibly it might be the thing they need to do. You'd hope not, but for now I don't really care. Personally, they're fun to watch. They will get to the playoffs and European Cup quarter or semi-finals, whichever version of it they're in, most years with the squad and the infrastructure that they've got there. So one year they'll get lucky, but I think I'd much rather have teams playing like Bristol than teams playing like Exeter. As good as Exeter are, it's just more interesting and better for rugby.
Yeah.
And that's a really good point that I wanted to pick up, moving on to that Exeter game, of the Exeter Bath game, and whether you want to disagree with me or not, or agree with me, is completely up to you. But I was watching Exeter and going, they're clearly a really, really, really good side, but I don't like watching them play rugby because it's very attritional. It's right, we're going to wait for them to make a mistake. Bath made mistakes. They gave away a couple of penalties. They put them in the right area, right, and then it goes in the 5-metre channel. It's then gone, oh, it's indefendable. And to be fair, like Exeter have got the power game, they've got up there, but they're just not that attractive to watch. And I kind of sat there going, why isn't Joe Simmonds being talked up for England at the moment? And I just think he doesn't really shine in that team because he doesn't have to. But for me, like on him very quickly, I think he's definitely put his head above the parapet of that he can do things a little bit more excitingly. And if he had a different type of game plan, or a bit more where he's allowed to take the ball to the line a bit more, because you saw what he could do when he gets to the line. He can get over the ball, the lovely offload to Hogg. He then offloads again for the one of the latter tries. Like, he's probably going to take a bit more consideration. I always looked at him and gone, no, he's kind of there and thereabouts, but he stood up. But again, they're going to come. We talked about this on the pod. I think a team that we're going to probably start hating is maybe the wrong word, because now we've lost Saracens. But I don't like watching Exeter play anymore. I'm really sorry to say that.
I think everyone in rugby knows that that's what Exeter are like. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to change that. And it's the same thing as what you were saying, Harry, in terms of defence wins championships. They've clearly worked out what works for them and works really well for them. And that's what they're going to just keep doing until they win championship after championship after championship. And they're not going to change, which is upsetting for somebody watching the game. But as people that understand kind of what good rugby is, and to be fair, it's quite good at building very good England players. That they're very, very good defensively.
Yeah,
they're pretty much playing Test rugby, aren't they? Pretty much every game. So in a way, it's probably good for England, because it helps to build those players that are going to do well for England in those really tight games. On Joe Simmonds, I think that he's never really shone out too much for me. He's always been very, very steady. Hasn't done too much wrong, and as he said, it's just fed other people and played into their game plan. I think this is one of the first few games where I've seen where he's been a permanent fixture, like a consistent fixture in that highlights reel, and he's actually done things himself, and he's really created things off his own back. And I think he must have been working on that. I think he must know that that's one of the bits of his games he needs to work on. And if he was ever in the running for England, I think it's now from some of those performances he's put in recently. Those are the little bits that he needed to do, I think, to really round off his game. So hopefully we'll see some more of that.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly on Joe Simmonds, I think you'll struggle to show yourself to be a test level 10 in club rugby generally. It's clearly a very, very different test. The defence in club rugby are nothing like what you've faced at test level, which is why teams are so reluctant to try out some of, or sort of give time to some of these really mercurial, fun 10s that a whole system is based around. So you see Cipriani, you see Quade Cooper, you see there have been a few in New Zealand. Sorry?
Marcus Smith's a good example. Quinn's based a lot around him now, I'd say.
Marcus Smith to an extent, but I think he's probably the closest of the non-Ford Farrell 10s in England. Okay. But with Joe Simmonds, he just has so little responsibility in Exeter's system. Obviously, relative to any other 10 in a team that's going to win the Premiership, he does a lot, obviously, but it's such a system-oriented team, and he kicks his points very well, which is good, and something that Bath and whoever Wasps were playing Bristol, something that Sheedy really struggled with, and I think Simmonds would certainly be in the Wales squad over Sheedy, but he's got some way to go to prove himself to be anywhere near Ford, Farrell, Smith for me.
I think the more experience at these top level finals and stuff, this is probably the first year when he's completely chucked steam off his horse, basically. So I think it will come with time, but not yet. And I think like you say, it's process. I mean, their pack was just dominant. Now, if you're a prop, I bet you all props love watching Exeter. But kind of, they just need 5 big blokes in front 5 who like to carry and pick and go instead of going for the corner near the line, and they're great. But again, one thing I would note just briefly is that Bath's attack was not great. We're still waiting for the Gervin Dempsey of Leinster attacking moves, and it's not come yet. So at some point, I mean, our 4-pack's done really well. We've got some exciting backs. We just need to use them and have some more, more structure to it.
I don't want to single him out because I don't think it's necessarily all his fault that the Bath attack that has Jonathan Joseph, that has Joe Thokonasenga, has Rory McConaughey in it. But Bath need a new 10. Like Reece Priestland was the definition of shovel shit. There was so much in that game where he didn't do all he did was just pass. Just didn't run at the line, didn't really kick that much, didn't really try anything. Like, they just need a little bit of something to shake him up. He's a quality fly half. He wouldn't have got international caps when he's not, but he's the reason why he's not the Welsh number 1, and Dan Bigger is, and they're talking about bringing Callum Sheedy in. Like, Bath could do with with someone we talked about Ben Spencer, and again, Ben Spencer had a solid game, but they could probably do with someone to match up with that, and potentially another 12. Kevin Redpath, actually, to be fair to him, had his best game in a Bath shirt by an absolute country mile, and he's definitely one for the future. Matavesi is a good option as well because he's loving his dummies and goes are really exciting, big ball carrier. But yeah, they need something to excite that back line. JJ's trying to do stuff and he can't do anything. Like Singer's, he hasn't played for so long. They chucked him in when really they should have gone with Rocco. Joe, I don't know whether that was because he hasn't played that well, but he just didn't look anywhere near where he needed to be in the picture. Rory McConaughey, we talked about, is a good player, and he's probably surprised me this year of how good he actually can be. But yeah, they just need a bit of something there. Something just needs something.
I think you don't have a 10 and 12 consistently playing together. We're now having Reece Houston play consistently. Changed, I think, every game for the past 5 games. That actually you're not going to build any consistency, and they need to just decide on who. We really need a new fly half, basically. I don't want to put it all on him, but we just need to have that. Got so many good outside backs, but if they don't get decent ball, and you can see Joseph is trying lots, but it's all on Joseph, and Joseph does a lot of defensive work. I just feel there's so much pressure on Joseph. He's apparently our highest paid player at the moment. That it puts all the pressure on him to get the back line kind of working, and I just can't. There's not much creativity, and you can't sit back against Exeter and expect to shovel shit and get anywhere. We had loads. First 20 minutes, we were camped in their half.
Yeah,
we had nothing to show for it, really.
There was a lot of times in there that you guys made mistakes very closely to the line. I think the prime example is Will Stewart not listening to the call of we need to go wide here and picking the ball up and going the other way and then running into Underhill on the try line. And they both know it, that they fucked it, because it then gets a turnover. They've got to score from there. There was another opportunity where they butchered areas where, and that's like Bath have done exceptionally well, I think, over since the restart. They've probably been one of the informed teams, but they've still got a bit to go. And I think a recruitment at fly half could do them well. I think someone they've talked about is Cohen Bosch, who I didn't learn a lot about Cohen Bosch from watching the Sharks game over the weekend. They won 19-16 against the Lions in a pretty uneventful kicking show, but he can kick goals. He's got a lot. I could watch him kick all day. He's got a beautiful, beautiful kick. I could watch him kick all day.
Yeah.
Anything else on Premiership, or should we talk about the game of the weekend?
Just some context on Joe Simmonds, actually. While you were discussing that, I had a quick look to see who his immediate age contemporaries are, because he only got 2 under-20 caps, and I'm not sure which squad he was eligible for, either the 2016 or 2017 under-20s World Cup. But in 2016, the England team had Max Malins at 15 and Harry Malander at 10. So
not a fly off.
But you would say Simmonds has achieved more than them.
Yeah.
And is probably closer in the pecking order than them for his age.
Yeah.
And then the 2017 team had Tom Parton at 15, who's very much not a 10. Jacob Umanga, and then James Grayson. So
he slipped through the net, really, hasn't he?
Yeah, he slipped through the net and has then done quite well staying under the radar and staying within the Exeter system. So there's obviously the small conspiracy theory that some people in Exeter have that the England system doesn't rate them. But if he'd produced at under 20 level, he might have a better case now, because there is certainly no question that certainly Umanga and Malins are fantastic. Nobody doubts that. But yeah, an interesting point that he's not really been anywhere near England at any point in his career. Well,
speaking of someone who was selected when they were very young, when he was 18, and then he's had a very up and down career, but who stood out in a position that he's always wanted to play, never really got an opportunity to play, and that was James O'Connor at fly half for Australia against New Zealand, who was absolutely brilliant. I mean, that game as a whole was one of the best international games I've seen since the World Cup. A 16-all draw, where both sides, after 80 minutes, are still chucking the ball in the pissing rain in Wellington. It was absolutely incredible. But Australia, they're back. We were a little bit concerned about all their players leaving and not having enough options in second row and this, that and the other. But Dave Rennie's picked who's on form and they stood up. Harry Wilson was brilliant. Filippo Daugunu is the real deal. He looks absolutely phenomenal. Nick White at 30 is still a fantastic scrum half. And they really should have won the game. And New Zealand, who probably thought they might beat them quite easily, had a game. And it was a game.
Yeah. I do think the conditions are a leveller. But they could have been a real leveller, i.e. destroying Australia's any chance of getting anything going whatsoever. And you'd think in a game where a dry game where New Zealand score 30 points, 30, 40 points, Australia might not keep pace with them. So this was probably a good way to ease Dave Rennie and Australia into this new era. But
yeah,
you play the cards that you're dealt, and they did really well.
They were the best.
And New Zealand has not had a. Oh, sorry. New Zealand have not had a good record at Wellington over their past 5 games. So they drew this last weekend. Last year they drew 16-all with South Africa. The year before they drew, they lost to South Africa by 2 points. And then it wasn't that, and then they won against France. And the game before that was when they lost in the Lions. They haven't had a great record in Wellington over the past 5 games. Drawn 2, lost 2, only won 1. But I think the conditions played a lot. But I think, they might get tonked in the next game, Australia. But we know that they've got it in the tank there at the moment, and they can be competitive. Which I think the kind of concern is that everyone was talking up New Zealand post Super Rugby Atora, and they were just going to get wiped the floor against Australia.
And I think slowly but surely they're solving position groups. So O'Connor's young enough that he might make the next World Cup, just about. And if not, then Noah Lolesio will have a bit more experience by then.
Yeah,
and he'll be
as well.
Exactly, and Will Harrison, and they'll be coming into a team that then the back 3 is sorted for now.
100%.
Those 3 that started. Daugunu is it Daugunu or Daugunu?
Filippo Daugunu, yeah, quality.
He is brilliant. Yeah. And I don't know if you know this sort of hot fact on him. He was the Fiji under-20 football goalkeeper.
Wow.
Sort of moving to rugby.
What a fact that is.
Yeah. Bizarre, but it's not that surprising, really, considering how extraordinary an athlete he is and how good really his footballing skills are. Some of his kicking when he's playing for the Reds is fantastic, and he's a real, like we talked about this when we were talking about Super Rugby Australia and how well the Reds were doing, but he's a really well-rounded winger. He's not just a freak athlete. He's not just a rugby league finisher moved over. He is everything you need in a winger. He's a bit young, a bit inexperienced at the moment, but he's very, very good.
But I just think that he's good enough, get him in. Like the other options they have out there are not at his level yet. So get him in and play him. Like Corin Betty on the other wing's got the experience. Tom Banks is very exciting. Then you've got the dynamic of having Reece Hodge on the bench, who then comes off and nearly wins it with that absolute gun of a boot. I mean, bringing him off the bench, you can play 13, 15 in the wing is probably his position he's going to play because he's getting on a bit. And that's actually his best position because they can call upon a guy that can smack a ball 60 metres and he was so unlucky not to win the game for them. But Hunter Paisami, someone we talked about like at the start of Wave when we started the podcast, brilliant at 13. Him and Matt Tamua is the way to go. Tamua's exciting. They've got a second pivot. The key for me with Australia was that they they flipped it. They kept changing things. They picking and going. They were going the other way. They attacked left, attacked right. They kicked over the top. They pulled it out the back. It wasn't the Australia of old of we're going to try and go wide or earn the right to go wide and then like didn't get anywhere and they struggled. It was pickups from the base. It was Psycho-Lotto. It was Matt Phillip coming on inside lines. It was Harry Wilson picking up and going. It was just, and New Zealand couldn't deal with that. Like New Zealand defended relatively well. And I'm not saying New Zealand were awful, but Australia flipped the game plan while New Zealand went for their classic, we're going to beat you with our power and then we're going to go wide in their hands to set up. They're trying the corner. I can't remember who scored in the corner, but that was incredible. But
yeah, no, it's
all right.
Yeah,
it's really encouraging. And I don't know if you noticed it or if it was sort of the way the highlight package ended up structured so that these two events were right next to each other. But the break, New Zealand's turnover and break that led to Ioane's mistake should have been a try. They'd done all the work and he knocked it on. Came off Australia doing a really nice top of the line out to the hooker. Hooker pops it inside to the left winger, who then bursts through what is quite a nice gap. But the execution from that hooker inside pass wasn't very good. In fact, it was really
Falafanga passed it to his own hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but then the direct next highlight that played was New Zealand running the exact same move perfectly and George Bridge making 50 metres and I think leading up to the Aaron Smith try.
Yeah.
So it's like actually in the round, that's actually very encouraging because for New Zealand to be fundamentally, if you're any team in the world, doing the same but sort of set play moves as New Zealand in the same position on the pitch, in the same game state, making the same decisions as the All Blacks do, you're making the right decisions. So it's very encouraging for Australia that Dave Rennie's got them to the point where they're doing things like that. And if the only thing that's holding them back from being at that level is the execution, then that's fine.
Yeah.
And that'll come in time.
100%. Like I would say that Australia team is pretty much bang on to where Dave Rennie probably wants to take it. They might want to think about having Tate McDermott on the bench as a 9. I think Nick White thoroughly deserves that shot, but Jake Gordon is basically Nick White, but not as good as Nick White. They need something completely different, and Tate McDermott is that person. I think is one thing that I would change, but not a lot from the Australian side. I don't think they need to change too much. Pete Salmu had a great game. He's put himself up. They were talking beforehand about the lock crisis, but Matt Phillip, and I know he's going to Poe, but him and Psycho-Lotto are just phenomenal. And then you can bring Simmonds off the bench to strengthen them up, and Lotto goes to 6. Like,
I must say, Simmonds coming on immediately giving away a penalty in front of the sticks. Not great.
Just why have we signed?
No,
we're not
leading round in what was so blatant.
But to bring someone off the bench in his quality as Ala Toa at tight head, the Brumbies skipper, is very good. Tanai Tupou, great game.
Great.
Australia looking good. The one thing I will say to New Zealand, which is a little bit terrifying, is I don't think that was New Zealand's strongest team by a considerable way. There's a few changes in there that I would make. For example, Caleb Clarke has to start next week because he was, and I will say it again, impactful. Geordie Barrett needs to be playing 15 because what's the point of having him on the wing when you can have Caleb Clarke out there? D-Mac's fine, like he's a good player, but Geordie Barrett's on fire at the moment. In a kind of nicest possible way, I was quite pleased that Bowden was injured because Bowden should never have been anywhere near the 15 shirt anyway. George Bridge is a good winger, but Seba Reece will come back and take his position pretty comfortably. And then Hoskins Satutu coming off the bench really puts someone like Sam Cane under pressure, or even Shannon Frazilla under a bit of pressure. But then I'll say Sam Cane actually did have a good game. I'll give him his credit. He stood up, but there's some holes in there that New Zealand might want to fill.
But those holes are currently filled by Richie Mo'unga and sorry, my Teams is ringing from work. I'll come back in a minute.
No worries. We'll stay tuned for that. What you are going to say something about Bowden Barrett is he's not going to be. My point of Bowden Barrett would be that he at the moment is the second choice fly half because Richie Monger's got better form than him. As soon as Richie Monger's form drops, then Bowden can jump on him. But I don't want him to be at fullback because I don't think he's the best option at fullback because his brother's the better option at fullback. Damien McKenzie is a fantastic fly at fullback, but even he's not on the top form of his game. While Geordie Barrett is, and Caleb Clark is better than all of them.
Yeah. I think I'd argue as well that if you don't pick Geordie Barrett, is the next one not Will Jordan?
I think he's injured.
Oh, is he? Okay, that makes things different. But
yeah,
still, yeah. I would have. My first question when I saw the teams initially was, why is Geordie on the wing? He should be at fullback, and then as you say, you get Caleb Clark or somebody else in there. And then when I saw that Bowden was injured, I thought, okay, great. Well, they're just going to swap that around. Geordie will play 15. And they brought DMAC in. And I think they are just sticking to the people they know have played Test rugby and have the experience there. But I think they, as you said, with, I think it was Dalguna or somebody else, if they're good enough, just play them.
Yeah.
Because especially if we're going on Aotearoa form, Bowden's probably not there and neither is DMAC. So,
and actually,
that are on form.
And sorry, Joe. And actually, I think the other thing is that, like, Dave Rennie's new, he's going on form, he's doing the team that he wants to do and what he wants to put together. Like, if there's any time when New Zealand should be just going on form and playing and testing new people and stuff, it's now. We know Bowden Barrett can play fullback. We know he's a world class, he won the World Cup at fullback. We know he's world class. Do we necessarily need to see him now at fullback? Yes, you want to pick on form, but actually there's clearly fullbacks who are on better form. Same with, it's a tough one with Sam Cane. I know he had a good game, but now in a COVID world where we don't have a full rugby championship, this is the time just to test players and give them that experience. And it might be next game that happens and New Zealand start testing things, but I don't see why we kind of just like, I don't know. I think it's probably a bit of a New Zealand way that they're so good at blooding new players and they don't like to make mass changes. It's not a New Zealand thing to do.
Because I would just say on that, like, again, I'm one of the ones that have been quite critical of Sam Cane. He's a phenomenal player. He really, really is. However, he's not the best seven in New Zealand at the moment. And they hand tie themselves by giving him the captaincy, where if he'd actually held off and did what Dave Rennie did, which was not give him the captaincy and then decide, oh, actually, Michael Hooper is still my best option, then he can have the captaincy back. That's what he should have done. Because you could look at New Zealand and go, Sam Whitelock could be the captain for the next 2 years. Patrick Tuipulotu should be the captain because he's the best second row they've got. And Ardy Sarvea could be the captain. Or, if you really wanted to, throw it to one of the backs and do it. But at the moment, I don't think Sam Cane should be in that 7 shirt. It should be Frizzell, Ardy Sarvea at 7, and captain probably, with big old Hoskins at 8, with Dalton Paps on the bench.
I think they've ended up doing the old Dylan Hartley, haven't they? Giving some of the captaincy and he's their leader, but should be nowhere near the starting 15. I just dread to think who's that Jamie George that's getting stuck on the bench.
So it's Hoskins at the moment.
Yeah.
You look good.
25 tackles, 0 missed in a test match.
Oh, he's brilliant. I didn't say he had a bad game. He had a fantastic game. I'm just saying. He didn't. Those weren't his stats in Super Rugby. Lachlan Berkshire had better stats than in Super Rugby. I know it's Super, but he did step up. He was one of the better players in New Zealand. Where in a game where they needed a few more to stand up, they might look at 12 because Jack Goodhue's not. I don't think Jack Goodhue's at the peak that he could be.
I think Laumape would be first choice had he not been injured.
Yeah.
Now he's just on such outrageous form and has rounded his game and his skill set out to the point where Goodhue is obviously still very good, but Laumape is next level. But obviously, the problem with all of these conversations about New Zealand selection choices, as it has been more or less since rugby started being a thing, is that in every position they have 3 world-class players, or more or less every position. So you can have entire debates about who you would select, which are fundamentally based on your personal philosophy of how you like rugby played. And in the end, that team would still win 85% of its matches, no matter who was actually playing. So, yeah, it's good fun, but I think they'll probably be all right.
Yeah, I think so. We're looking a bit press of time, so I'll just rattle off a couple little things I wanted to bring up quickly. So Super Rugby Unlocked, which is Super Rugby South Africa, started with the Sharks beating the Lions 1916. The Cheetahs hammered the Pumas 53-31, and the Bulls beat the Grigas. Is that how you pronounce it? Grigas 30 points to 23. Only seen the highlights of the Sharks Lions game. Pretty uneventful. As I said earlier, Cohen Bosch looking like he can kick some goals. But I'll probably watch a little bit more of that over the week.
Well, it's obviously quite nice for the Cheetahs to be finally playing a team that is less well-resourced than they are, because their entire existence has been playing against half the Ireland team, half the Wales team, half the Scotland team, etc. But there are the highlights of that game are really good fun, and the Cheetahs wingers are terrifyingly fast and direct, and running short lines off 9, 3 meters away from a ruck, going at their top speed, because if anything makes contact with them, injuries are happening. But somehow they managed to avoid it. It's really, really exciting to watch, and I think quite good that these, obviously the Sharks Bulls game was a bit of a kick fest, but if these games can be a bit looser and a bit more open, then they'll just be more fun and more people will be watching.
But especially in South Africa, where you know that it's going to be, usually it's just brute force, bit of pace out wide. You'd like to see them develop a little bit more of an attractive product, you just said. So I'd like that.
More professional teams is good.
Yeah, 100%
in the world.
I like the development. I like that they've included those 2 teams as well. I like that a lot. Let's do some predictions quickly. But before that, big shout out to London Irish legend Blair Cowan on getting recalled into the Scotland's training squad for the internationals at the age of 34.
He's earned it.
He had a fantastic year, way up there in the turnovers. He might definitely up in the top 3, and then probably amount of tackles as well he's done. So great job for him. I've just seen that Lama's missed out on the Six Nations squad because he's injured, right? With a shoulder problem. Right, fixtures for next week. So Friday night is Bristol Toulon in the final of the Champions Cup. Oh, sorry, the Challenge Cup. Sorry, who are we going with?
Bristol.
That's going to be Bristol, isn't it?
Bristol quadruple. Yeah, go on there, Brace. Saturday, quarter 5. It's Exeter Racing.
Finn Russell secure his European Player of the Year and back into Scotland squad. Crown it all off.
I think it's quite a good tester of the team that plays test hard rugby, grinds out wins, versus a team that probably will create some magic somewhere. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins. I think it's probably going to be Exeter, to be honest, because they're so good at grinding out these wins in tough conditions.
I do think Racing's pack can keep pace with them power-wise. I think one of the few in Northern Hemisphere rugby that, or really world rugby, that can at a club level. So it could be quite good. Where's it being played, Johnny?
Good question.
Because if it's wet, Exeter will win. Frankly.
Let me have a look.
But if it's being played at
Ashton Gate.
Oh, right. Is it? Are they both in Bristol?
Oh, I'm just going to hang around by the stadium and just
I actually do think they are, Johnny. I think they are both in Bristol. And the weather on Saturday is predicted to be dry. So I think it could be good. And it's a good pitch there as well.
That's very good.
It's not a boggy one. So
give me Exeter, but then Wasps will beat Exeter in the Premiership final. Because I think Racing will batter them, like physically.
The week off for Wasps will be important.
And Wasps are on fire, so I think Wasps nick it. Because I don't think you can do 2 in a row against those two teams. Exeter win this because Racing haven't played enough rugby, and the rugby that we have seen of them, they're on up to on the same level. However, watch out Finn Russell and watch out for one Imhoff, is all I can say. And Iberiben to cause some absolute havoc. And our mate, shout out, let's get Machino, our big old mate that we met in a car park, Maxime Machino. That's a story for Rock and Roll After Dark, but how we met Maxime Machino in a car park in Bordeaux. Up the boy, get him off the bench, get him in the team. We love Maxime Machino. And then on Sunday, the other game of real note is Australia, New Zealand at 4:00 in the morning. I have to say, I do like New Zealand not accommodating the rest of the world and just playing games when they should do. And if you like rugby, record it like I do.
No, it's timed directly so that the people in the west coast of the US watch it. That's clearly their prime market.
Of course, yeah, the prime market.
And 8 p.m. kickoff, perfect.
What are we thinking?
Eden Park, New Zealand by 25.
Yeah.
They'll have rallied, won't they? Yeah. Australia would have built up to this for a little while. First game of Dave Rennie, really want to hit the ground running. I think New Zealand will have watched the game tape and will have probably fixed their problems back in Eden Park. So yeah, I think they'll take it.
But dry in Auckland, I think that's New Zealand.
New Zealand to make changes. Caleb Clark to score a hat-trick. New Zealand. Last game as well, because I've just seen them. Bordeaux, which we have seen this game live before.
Yeah.
It's in Pau. Bordeaux need a win because they lost the other week when they last played. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get the job done. That concludes episode 19 of the Rock and Roll podcast. Thank you for tuning in and listening. As I say, we are just 4 blokes that like talking about ruggers on a Monday evening. We'll see you on Sunday or Monday, depending on how we feel, with the review of Exeter versus Racing, the Bristol Bears, and Toulon and New Zealand, Australia, plus much more rugby chat. See you later.
Yep. Wear a mask.